I was very much and very pleasantly surprised to smell something this close to Aventus, that it could be mistaken to another batch of Creed Aventus. So let me tell you from the start that this video is not going to be another Creed Aventus Clone type of video. This should be the video that should end your search for the perfect Creed Aventus clone. So if until now we had clones of Creed Aventus that smelled close to Aventus when smelled from someone else, but when smelled up close you could tell it was a clone, this time this is so high quality that it is very hard to tell the difference between the two. So in this video I'm going to share with you the new best Creed Aventus clone, which is Loewe Esencia EDP. It's very important that it's EDP and not EDT, because the EDT smells nothing like the EDP, because the EDP smells like Creed Aventus. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to compare it to Creed Aventus, my 2021 batch, and more important, I'm going to compare it with what was considered until now the best Creed Aventus clone, Armaf Club de Nuit Intense Man. Now, for those of you who haven't smelled Creed Aventus yet, if you want to smell it, you can find it in stores that are selling niche fragrances. You can find samples. Also, I think it's more likely to find and test Creed Aventus in a store rather than the Loewe Esencia EDP, because this is not very popular, so you won't be able to find it physically in stores unless you are maybe in Spain, because this is a Spanish house. But you can also find samples like this one and test it for yourself. And that's what I highly recommend. I wouldn't recommend blind buying any of these two if I haven't smelled nothing like these fragrances, because they aren't cheap. Getting back to Loewe Esencia, the bottle now looks like this. And again, if you are a fan of the original Loewe Esencia EDT, this smells nothing like that one. I still cannot believe that the search has finally ended. This is the third day of testing Creed Aventus versus Loewe Esencia EDP side by side. I didn't want to make a video right away after smelling the fragrance to get it all hyped up for nothing. I waited for the complete results so I can give you proper, accurate information. I tested the Loewe fragrance compared to my 2021 batch Creed Aventus. If you haven't smelled the 2021 batch of Creed Aventus, this is basically a fruity, musky batch, which is pretty much like the standard version of the latest Creed batches. And this one, the pineapple is not that obvious anymore. In the opening, it's fruity, but doesn't smell that much of pineapple. And then there are some florals. There's vanilla, the sweetness from the vanilla, and lots of musk and ambergris in the dry down and in the ending. Still very good performance on my skin. And now let's compare it to the Esencia EDP. So initial spray, very high quality from the Loewe. This house makes high quality fragrances. Now I have to admit that I was a bit disappointed to see that the house of Loewe, which I respected and I liked it very much because one of their fragrances is my all-time favorite designer fragrance. I was a bit disappointed to see that they started to make clones, but after smelling it, I am now glad that they did, because someone finally did it the right way. And with this one, Loewe kept their quality standards high. So this time, guys, with this clone, when you initially spray it, it's going to be hard to tell the difference between Aventus and the clone. I really hope I'm not going to forget anything that I'm supposed to say, because I have so many thoughts going on in my head right now about this comparison, and I really hope that I don't get overwhelmed and I forget some important detail, because I know how important this video is, at least for me, because basically this is one of the reasons why I started my fragrance journey, to find alternatives for more expensive fragrances, especially for Creed Aventus. And I've been through so many clones of Creed Aventus. You guys know, you guys who have been with me through all this journey, you know how many Creed Aventus clones I have smelled. So let me start again. Every clone that I have smelled so far of Creed Aventus, where they did wrong was in the opening. They never managed to get the opening right, because Creed has some very high quality ingredients, especially in the opening. But this time, with the quality of Loewe, Esencia manages to get that level so high that this fragrance can be confused with a different batch of Creed Aventus. Compared to my 2021 batch, this one in the opening, it feels brighter. It has a more prominent apple note, making it a bit sweeter and more powerful. Seems like a stronger fragrance in the opening, whereas the Esencia is smokier, goes a bit into the darker side, but it is also fruity. I don't get that much pineapple with the Esencia also, and also has some citruses which gives it brightness. But I think overall, in the opening, it smells like an older batch of Creed Aventus. 30-40 seconds later, after the citruses settle down, the fragrances are becoming more and more similar. The smokiness in the Esencia EDP is going to settle down after a couple of minutes, and then it will become even closer to the Aventus. Aventus still is brighter, and in the dry down it feels like a more floral fragrance, while the Esencia is more focused on the woods and it has like a slight leathery note. If in the opening Aventus was sweeter, as the dry down goes further, Esencia will end up becoming slightly sweeter than Aventus. Compared to this 2021 batch of Creed Aventus, which I personally like, but definitely not one of the best batches of Creed Aventus, it feels like the Loewe feels that it has a bit more going on. That slight leathery note stays with the fragrance until it dies, and it doesn't deviate the smell too much with this added note. It just adds up to the complexity of the fragrance, and it doesn't change the smell too much. So the fragrances, the longest part of their lifespan, are very similar. The biggest differences are in the opening and in the very end, where Creed Aventus smells mostly like musk and ambergris, this 2021 batch, and the Esencia EDP smells like musks, woods, vanilla, and some ambergris. Now let's talk about performance, which is a very important subject. With Creed Aventus, I get well over 12 hours of longevity on skin with very good projection. I'm able to smell it the next day while moving around the house, and the same goes for the Esencia EDP. Now let's compare Esencia a bit with Club de Nuit Intense Man. I have only the EDT, but I doubt the EDP comes as close, as high in quality as Esencia EDP does. So comparing it to the EDT, the opening is very obvious that this is a clone of Creed Aventus. This basically smells lemony, synthetic, almost like floor cleaner or some type of detergent. I personally don't mind it that much. I've got used to it, especially for this price. But in the dry down is where Club de Nuit shines, as it becomes very close to Creed Aventus. But still, when you compare it by smelling it up close, when you compare them side by side, Creed Aventus versus Club de Nuit Intense Man, you can tell the difference. The Armaf is very good when smelled on other people, because that's when you can't really tell the difference. And the projection coming from this one is awesome, especially for this price. That's why up until now, this was the best Creed Aventus clone. It might still be. I mean, for people who just want to get compliments and good reactions from other people and don't want to spend too much on a clone, this will probably still remain the best, as it's very cheap for what it offers. But for someone who wants to get the Aventus experience up close and wants to smell something that doesn't feel like a clone, then you probably want to look into this fragrance. So let's now talk a bit about the ugly side, which is the price. So we all know the price of Club de Nuit Intense Man. We know it's a very good price. I mean, I think it's 10 times cheaper than what Creed Aventus retails for. What about the Loewe? Well, Loewe is not cheap, guys, but still half the price of Creed Aventus. Also, I think it's very important to mention that it's cheaper than the clones coming from the higher end brands such as Dua fragrances or Perfumes Vintage. And I have smelled so many variations and iterations of Creed Aventus clones coming from Perfumes Vintage, and none have managed to come this close to Creed Aventus. I mean, Perfumes Vintage is a brand that has built itself by making clones of Creed Aventus. And another important thing here to add in comparison to these higher end brands is that you won't be able to find fragrances from Perfumes Vintage or Dua on online websites that are selling fragrances such as Notino, Fragrance X. So most of the time you'll have to buy them at full retail price, which is not cheap for a clone. But you can find fragrances from Loewe on these kind of websites, and you can find them at a lower price than it retails for. And you can sometimes find discounts on this fragrance. So guys, this pretty much ends my video and my journey on finding the best Creed Aventus clone. If I've missed something that I wanted to say, I'm probably going to do a follow-up or maybe a short video. And that's it, guys. I'm happy that I'm finally now free of these thoughts that I wanted to share with you. I'm happy that I was able to bring you guys yet another amazing clone. And until the next video, keep smelling great.